Of Napoleon.
I'm not built like other men.
This is something I might watch, though.
Imagine how Napoleon Bonaparte would feel if he could somehow learn the definition of Napoleon complex. The French commander who conquered half of Europe was subjected to plenty of cracks about his height and his own lifetime, but he didn't live nearly long enough to see his name reduced to a pseudo-psychological shorthand. The infinity continues unabated with Napoleon, a lavish, pricey Hollywood tour of Bonaparte's biggest military and political accomplishments that also happens to be a half-comic character study of an insecure weirdo overcompensating for something. There are few short jokes, but almost all of the humor is at the expense of a man small in much more than stature. Make no mistake,
Holy
Napoleon
crap.
does fit the profile of a standard historical epic.
They did, they
at
made
least
him
in the
super
broad
short in
strokes.
this.
The film spans several decades, from its subject's rise to power straight through to his final, ignoble days in exile, dramatizing many of the major Wikipedia bullet points in between.
Of
And with
course.
Ridley Scott behind the camera, one can count on seeing the Emperor's most famous tactical victories recreated on a giant canvas, grand in scale and bloody in detail. But the fulcrum of this history lesson, the idiosyncratic center of the movie, is Joaquin Phoenix's performance in the title role.
How'd he
really
do?
takes the great man out of the great man biopic, inserting a horny dweeb in his place.
You are just a tiny little brute that is nothing without me.
But they probably told him to act that way,
Directed by
right?
David Scarpa opens in 1793 with the French Revolution. Once fitted for a crown, Marie Antoinette is fitted for the guillotine. Into the void steps Napoleon, a 24-year-old artillery commander whose keen intellect for strategy is eclipsed only by his career aspirations. On the battlefield and in the political arena, he is a creature of opportunity, always seeking advantage. Eventually, he'll parlay his military conquest to a seat in the throne as emperor.
I found the crown of France in the gutter and placed it atop my own head.
Scott gallops through the career milestones, but slows to a trot whenever the man's libido is inflamed. Much of Napoleon revolves around his romance with Josephine, the widowed beauty he eventually marries, played by Vanessa Kirby. Their courtship is its own kind of battle, a struggle for power fought through coaxed declarations of faith and need. You would be
Did that
nothing
actually
without
happen,
me,
though?
makes her declare, right before Scott cuts to Josephine demanding the same words from him later. There is a touch of sex comedy in their interactions, alternately starring a boy obedient to his mother lover and a teenager pumping away at jackrabbit speed. The movie
Wow.
frames much of this action through Napoleon's letters to Josephine, read in voiceover, which has the effect of linking all his choices to his feelings of ardor and jealousy. A reductive but dramatically persuasive reading.
I'm the first to admit when I make a mistake.
Phoenix, as ever, folds psychology into physicality. He looks initially like a totem of repression, clenched tighter than his uniform. Again, the height thing is not overemphasized. That's low-hanging fruit, beneath artists of Phoenix and Scott's reputation. This Napoleon is more emotionally stunted. Another boy man on the spectrum of arrested development the star has continuously constructed. In him, you can see the immaturity of Freddie Quell, Arthur Fleck, and Beau Wasserman. At times, he's like a child doing an impression of adult sternness. The movie gets big laughs out of his lapses in self-awareness, how he doth protest too much on matters of his own insecurity and ambition. The conniption fits are especially inspired too. You think you're so great because you have boats, he impotently bellows at the Brits, his naval superiors.
I will not lead a second in command.
In between the comedy of manners, Scott orchestrates panoramas of visceral mayhem, a greatest hits of Napoleonic warfare, staged through slow motion.
Oh, they're gonna give this like a
and
7 or a
crowds of
6.
extras. He gives us the cracking ice misfortune of the Battle of Austerlitz and the vast smoking landscape.
I can already tell by the way they were
We see the
describing
size
it.
of the armies, the damage cannonballs can do to bodies both human and equine. All of this is as technically impressive as one might expect from a Hollywood filmmaker fond of spending mountains of money on live-action games of Risk. If the battles aren't quite immersive, they put you in the balcony instead of the trenches, that's maybe appropriate for a portrait of a leader who saw the men under him as a grist for the machine of war. It's telling that the movie lavishes little attention upon strategy or technical genius, and no rousing celebration on the aftermath of victory. It does keep a tally of the dead, however, a rising casualty list that puts the man's legacy in daunting statistical terms.
Napoleon is coming.
As historical theater, the film is streamlined to a fault, squashing some 30 years into a supercut of incident. It's hardly surprising that the director has a longer version in the chamber, a la his similarly sweeping Kingdom of Heaven. It's hard to shake the suspicion that a 4-hour Napoleon might be richer and, paradoxically, lighter on its feet. It would probably breathe more than this all-highlights cut, which feels rather impersonal in its ticking off of dates, names, and places.
General, we are discovered.
Good.
In its more intimate moments, the film flirts with something funnier and weirder, a veritable roast of royalty taking special delight in romantically and professionally humiliating one of humanity's most famous figures. It's as if Scott rewatched his own Gladiator, the film that put a love of old-world bloodshed into him, and
I love
realized that
Gladiator, great
the
movie.
character wasn't Maximus, but Phoenix's vain, bitter Commodus.
Am I not merciful?
His Napoleon is what it looks like when you build a whole towering drama around the fragile ego of such a scoundrel. And in the disparity between Napoleon's impact and his inherent smallness, the film gets at the complexes shaping today's halls of power. In the shadow of Bonaparte, little men continue to inflict their inadequacy on the world.
What is this costume you have on?
This is my uniform.
Watch, it's gonna be like a 7 or a
Returns to
6.
The old world battlefields and field
6 or 7.
of his Oscar-winning Gladiator with a decade-spanning biopic of the French tactician who conquered half of Europe. As a historical epic, Napoleon is handsome, but a little impersonal. You can really feel the absence of texture lost in getting it down under 3 hours. But between the textbook bullet points, a very funny anti-great man biopic peeks through, thanks largely to Joaquin Phoenix's performance as
Who called it? Who called it? Me, I called it.
For more
7.
movie reviews, check out what we thought of The Hunger Games: The Ballad of
I'll have to check that out because
Snakes and the
yeah, that review right there, that one was off. Promise. But the Napoleon one, I'll have to check it out.
Marvels.
I have to watch
for
it.
everything else in the world of entertainment.
Stick to IGN
with IGN.
and Ninja for watching IGN. Thank you.